Welcome to the EcoParent Podcast Network. I'm Sam, the founder of EcoParent magazine. My partner Alexis and I had zero experience in the publishing industry, no money, and a new baby. But we quit our jobs, leapt into the unknown, and started EcoParent magazine anyway. It was absolutely freaking terrifying. But at the same time, it felt right. Just a few years into the journey, Alexis was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer that later found its way to her brain. It was utter chaos, navigating treatment schedules, caring for a 3-year-old, and trying to run a fledgling business, not to mention the general emotional havoc. Alexis didn't make it, but the rest of us did, and I've spent the years since raising a wonderful son and building EcoParent into North America's top print magazine for conscientious families. Even 10 years in, we're still a very small crew. If you send an email, it's probably me that will answer you. And this podcast network is a monumental step for us, another leap into the unknown. But like before, it just feels right. And I know that Alexis would agree that the podcasting team I've assembled here is an incredible group of people whose only goal is to inspire the best in you. Okay, I'm going to shut up now and let you listen to the podcast. Thank you so much for stopping by. You're the reason we do what we do.
Welcome to the Healthy Green Homes podcast. This is a show for eco and health conscious parents who want to reduce toxins and your environmental footprint with simple changes in your home. I know this can be a complex and overwhelming topic, and my goal is to help break down the strategies into practical tips so you can leave each show feeling empowered to make your next move towards a healthier, greener home. I'm your host, Emma Roman, and I bring over 15 years experience as an accredited green building consultant, in addition to over 5 years as a toxics expert, helping families reduce toxins in their homes through my business, Green at Home. But this show isn't about me, it's about you. And I'll be bringing you the best of the best experts in all things related to green and healthy homes, so you can learn, be inspired, and feel confident to create your healthy green home. Without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Healthy Green Homes podcast. I'm your host, Emma Roman, and today I have a great interview with my guest, Stephanie Seferian, and we are talking all about sustainable minimalism. This topic is a little bit overwhelming for me because I am a wannabe minimalist, just can't quite make it happen. But what I love about Stephanie's approach is that she makes it real and applies to real life, because I think so many of the minimalist lifestyle bloggers out there either don't have children or make it seem like a house with kids can be completely all the time tidy and that Instagram perfect look. And what Stephanie brings in this conversation are real practical strategies to help you find a sense of happiness and calm and peace around having a home with less clutter and going about it in a way that also addresses the environmental impact of decluttering and bringing things into your home. It's such a rich, well-rounded conversation that I had with Stephanie. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Emma. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. Before we dive in, can you share a little about you and what sustainable minimalism means to you?
My name is Stephanie Seferian. I am the host of the Sustainable Minimalist podcast, which is a show about intentional and eco-minimalist living. I am the author of a book by the same name, Sustainable Minimalism. And I would say probably most importantly, I am the mother of 2 young daughters. We live outside of Boston. We have a dog and a cat and 10,000 bees. And I actually found myself so passionate about sustainable minimalism after becoming a mother. Sustainable minimalism is about understanding intuitively that living better means living with less, precisely because when we live with less, we are doing a service to our children. We are preserving the planet for our children.
I love it. And I think that's where a lot of people start their eco living mindset, is when either they start thinking about having kids or when kids enter the picture. It's also a bit of a double-edged sword, because when you have kids, all of a sudden there's this overwhelming amount of stuff that gets marketed to you or given to you or kind of expected of you to have in your home, right? Did you find that kind of at odds with your need to be minimalist, but then also having kids with a bunch of stuff?
Yeah, you really speak well to the paradox of, on the one hand, the transformative nature of becoming a mother makes you look critically at your buying behavior and your lifestyle. But on the other hand, there is no bigger of a consumption period in my life than having a child and all the stuff that came with the first child. I always tell the story that my husband and I, we lived in a 850 square foot apartment in Boston, and we happily lived there. We had just the right amount of stuff. And then the baby came. And with the baby came the gear and the toys and the 50 frilly dresses that she never wore. And so the stuff, the baby stuff really was my entry point into thinking about minimalism, living with less, and also sustainable minimalism, how living with less can help our planet.
And what are the big reasons that living a more minimalist lifestyle can help the planet and also you? Like, what are all the benefits that you have seen personally since adopting this lifestyle?
Yes, great question. So I see personal benefits. I experience personal benefits on day one, but there are also collective benefits to a simpler lifestyle. The personal benefits, the one I felt almost immediately, maybe within 5 minutes of decluttering an area, was reduced stress and anxiety. And that really can't be understated. For many of us, especially women, despite it being 2022, we still tend to be the household maintenance people, right? And so when our living spaces are cluttered, that contributes to stress and anxiety. I was spending a ridiculous amount of time organizing, cleaning, maintaining, hanging up all the excess stuff. And so another personal benefit that I experienced quite soon after, quote unquote, going minimalist or decluttering is that I had more free time. I mean, I was a new mother, I was home with an infant, so I didn't have a lot of it, but what free time I did have was no longer spent keeping my space tidy. And then with regard to the collective benefits that I discussed and the environmental benefits I discussed associated with living with less, well, all the stuff that we choose to buy requires resources, many of them non-renewable in order to create. Fossil fuels, metals, water. Water is arguably a non-renewable resource in 2022. So when we buy something, it's not just magically created and then arrives at our house. And especially when we declutter it and we send it to the landfill, items that decompose in landfills release leachate, which is a toxic sludge, and emit methane, which is a potent, powerful gas, more powerful than carbon dioxide. So simply choosing to allow less into our home and then on the back end, send less to the landfill is a powerful way of caring for our shared planet.
I can't agree more. And I think when we think about the bigger impact, it can feel like, okay, I've gone past the point of not being a minimalist. I would like to get to the point of being a minimalist. What do I do with all of this stuff that I've accumulated? And I've heard this is a struggle for a lot of people in my community, is just the act of starting to declutter can be enough to make them not start at all. So how can busy families make the time to reduce clutter and get that fresh start?
That's a great question. I must say, I hear it all the time. The task is so daunting that why even begin, right? Because it just seems so overwhelming. I would say, first of all, step one is to not bring the stuff in your home in the first place. So That doesn't answer your question, and I know that, but keep that in mind going forward. If you bring this into your home, you are later going to have to declutter it. There's work there. So stop right now bringing stuff into your home. To answer your question, though, where do you start? How do you start? I suggest starting in a non-sentimental area that you can reasonably tackle in ideally 30 minutes. A great place is usually the linen closet because, old towels and sheets aren't going to pull at your heartstrings necessarily. There's nothing difficult about tackling that area, or even the bathroom is another great one. But just open your linen closet. Let's take that example. Is it overstuffed like most linen closets are? Do you have a ridiculous amount of old towels that are frayed and embarrassing, but you don't want to get rid of them because you don't want to be wasteful, or you think you might need them one day? Why don't we start there? A great rule of thumb is that for every bed in your home, you should have 2 sets of sheets. One set is on the bed and then one set's in the closet. If you have more sheets than that, you might want to reconsider. I know I live in Boston. We do also need that 3rd set of flannel sheets because it's really cold. But start there. Start thinking about, why am I keeping this set of sheets that I never put on the bed because they're scratchy or they come off the corner? Like, why am I keeping this? And if I don't have a good reason, how can I best extend its life by giving it away, or in some instances, selling it?
It's funny you mentioned this because I just went through this with my own linen closet. And so even things that you couldn't use again, like I've heard of people sending towels and maybe even sheets to the Humane Society or vet practices or something. So you can get creative with where to send things as well, because if you're aware of not wanting to fill up the landfill, people are listening from all over the place. But do you have any go-tos for how to start researching where you can send things that maybe you couldn't sell or easily reuse?
So I should say that my platform way back in the early days, 5 or 6 years ago, started as that resource. My blog was like, oh, you have old tennis shoes. What could I do with them? Here are some organizations that will take them. And in those 5 years, I've really switched my efforts, primarily because when I give very specific answers like that, it often requires the shipping of an item around the globe. And I don't personally find that to be at all environmentally friendly. So I suggest first, the beauty of 2022 is that the internet is at our fingertips. We have Google. We can ask this question within our communities and hopefully get a community-centered answer. If not, there are always the big charities here by me, Goodwill and Salvation Army. They'll collect sheets and towels in decent condition. So rule of thumb for donating, you never want to donate something ratty-tatty, because if you don't want it because it's ratty-tatty, nobody else is going to want it either.
Yeah.
But if it's a great set of sheets that has a lot of life in it on a bed, you can donate it to those big charities. If the elastic is broken or if the ends on the linen is
right,
it's not looking great. It's not something you'd put on a bed for a guest, let's say. Goodwill, if you mark the bag saying like this is for textile recycling, they will textile recycle. You mentioned the Humane Society. Oftentimes, dog animal shelters will take the ratty-tatty stuff for their dog and cat and rabbit beds. So those are some ideas. But my number one tip with an asterisk and an exclamation point is always to check your local community first.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's where things like community Facebook groups can have their own separate issues, but they can also be a really good resource for people who have figured this out ahead of you. So I encourage you to use the internet at your disposal. As you say, it can be a lot simpler than I think we make it out to be. Because I think, if we see this mountain of stuff to get rid of, it's almost like that in itself is a form of mental clutter, right?
Mm-hmm. That's something that I believe a lot of the quote unquote minimalist influencers get wrong. Like everybody knows Marie Kondo, for example. She says donate, but she fails to mention that the donation process, the act of responsibly donating the stuff or discarding of the stuff in a way that doesn't just put it in the trash bin or in some cases the recycle bin, that often takes more time than the act of decluttering itself. So I always suggest for people who are tackling a small area, a large area, or anything in between, schedule 2 weekends or 2 dates. One is to declutter, but then the second date is to do the responsible discarding. Like, so what are you doing with this? Are you doing everything you can with this item to prevent it from going to the landfill? It's going to get there eventually, but can you do something to delay that end?
Yeah, that's a great point. So we're going to focus on a non-emotionally attached area. That is a great idea. And then picking a weekend with a narrow scope of an area that you're going to tackle, and then just kind of keep chipping away as you have weekends available.
It all depends on how motivated the declutterer is. There are a variety of ways in which you can tackle a problem. It also depends on how big the problem is. As a general rule, I always suggest starting in a non-emotional area. You don't want to go to the basement where your deceased grandmother's stuff is. You don't want to do that first. You want to start somewhere small and non-emotional. And the reason for that is because I'm willing to bet that you are going to experience immense personal benefits after that first or second, or definitely by the third little session you have tidying up and decluttering. And those positive consequences that you experience are going to likely snowball your efforts, so that as you get better and as you continue flexing this new muscle that you're working, the decluttering muscle, when it comes time for you to go to the basement and tackle your deceased grandmother's stuff, you are motivated and willing and ready to do it with gusto.
I've experienced that as well. I get way less attached to things when I have cleared other spaces out. It's amazing. And it's not to say that you can't keep any mementos. You can still keep certain things that are important to you. Like, I've got some stuff from when my kids were babies that I will probably pass on to them, but they are in a confined space and kind of a designated little keepsake area. That's how I handle it. What about you?
Yes, I definitely suggest that we keep certain things to memorialize our loved ones, or keep certain things for our children. Definitely, because things have the power and ability to tell a story, our family story. So it's really important. But the problem then becomes many of us keep everything or all the things or too many things, and then they spill out of their container, and before you know it, they are invading our homes, overflowing. So you mentioned you have them in a keepsake. That's a great way. Utilize the beauty of a container, right? So designate a container. Is it a shoebox? Is it a little plastic lidded bin? Whatever the container is, set the standard now that whatever you keep from your deceased grandmother fits in this container. Another way I like to do it, especially, so my grandmother passed within the last year and a half. And so I want to think about her. I want her, not in the basement in a box. I want her essence in my home. And so her china is a great example. I absorbed her china, but I don't need her china. And so I decided to keep just one teacup and one saucer, and I put it in our hutch. And so that teacup and saucer memorializes her, and it memorializes the happy memories that we had at holidays eating on this set of china. And that's enough for me. I don't need to keep all 12 place settings. One cup, one saucer displayed. I feel like I'm doing her a service and my home a service at the same time.
The simple, natural formula of Eucalyptus Delicate Wash is free from the harsh chemicals you expect in traditional laundry products like optical brighteners, enzymes, phosphates, and bleach. Eucalyptus is scented with pure essential oils, but also offers an unscented option for those with sensitivities. Lavender is a top pick for babies' knit clothing, toys, blankets, and quilts, as it's calming and promotes relaxation. It's ideal to use on nursing bras and diaper covers too. With a touch of lanolin in the formula, fibers will stay soft and conditioned. Spot treat stains and spills with the full-strength liquid before laundering, or carry Eucalyptus stain-treating wipes in your diaper bag to catch spills before they set. Feel good knowing that Eucalyptus is now part of the 1% for the Planet network, fighting for a better future for our planet. 1% of every bottle sold is given to local environmental initiatives. Learn more about this trusted brand at eucaland.com.
You know, it's all well and good to go through your home and declutter it. But, you know, as you said, right off the hop, start before you do that by reducing what you bring in the first place. How can you maintain that decluttered space, especially if you have children? I have such a hard time with one of my kids does not like to get rid of anything. And, you know, as they get older, the clutter just kind of morphs into different things like 8,000 Lego pieces, for example. And, you know, people like to give gifts and give different things. So, how do you maintain the clutter free as you are going about your daily life with other people in your household and other people outside of your household who may be contributing?
There's a lot there, Emma.
Yes, that was like 8 questions in one, and go.
Well, I will say first that it is really darn difficult to have a perfectly tidy house with children. So anybody listening who thinks that they can do that, reach out to me. I want to know. I have 2 kids. I have a podcast and a book all on this, and I still struggle with it. I will say that number one for me in my life that has helped is I have empowered myself as the person who is in charge of our household, maintaining our systems. I am the gatekeeper of our house. So I get to decide at the end of the day what comes in and what goes out. And for me, being really intentional about what comes in is the best way to keep my home tidy. So when we go to the dentist, we don't stop at the treasure chest to get a plastic knickknack. We just don't. We never have. Mm-hmm. We never will. When we go to a birthday party and they hand out the goodie bags, I try my absolute darndest to sneak out of there without the goodie bags. I go get the mail and there's 6 pieces of junk and 1 piece of great mail. I'm not going to bring the junk into the house. I'm going to stop at the recycle bin that's in the garage first, put the junk in the recycling, and then bring that 1 piece of good mail into the house. And I really try and use this philosophy all the time. So when my in-laws come to visit and they're unloading stuff on us because they're trying to declutter their house and it's easiest for them to put it on me, I have to be, as the gatekeeper, gentle and firm and say, thank you, but no, let me help you find a home for this item. That's not my home.
And I think people have a lot of struggle having those sorts of conversations, right? Because
Yes.
it can appear to be confrontational. You know, so many of us have been raised to be people pleasers and we don't want to ruffle any feathers. But I talk about this when I talk about toxins as well. We are the only ones responsible for protecting our boundaries. Nobody else is going to do that for us. And so I love how you don't just say no, you say, I will help you. Let's figure out where this can go instead. That's a really great balance. And I avoided the dentist treasure chest for a very long time until my kids got older. But now I try to bribe them and I'll say, we'll go get a cookie or something else instead. And I have very frank conversations about the fact that this piece of plastic junk is going to break in 30 seconds when you get home and start playing with it. And then you're going to have to put it in the garbage. And kids understand more of that stuff than I think we give them credit for. I think if we can help have those conversations with our kids, then we can empower them to make those decisions as well. And yes, they may not like it in the moment because they see this chest full of all of these stuff, all these things that they wouldn't normally have access to. But when you allow them to frame that decision, it empowers them to then carry on those good decisions going forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's important for us to teach our children about junk culture so that they can then, in turn, as they get older, identify it. A piece of plastic junk is essentially a single-use toy that's not going to provide any of the imaginative or gross motor or even fine motor benefits that we would ideally like to see in a toy. And so why then would we allow our children to have that instant gratification with an item that we are inevitably then going to have to send to the landfill? You also mentioned something else there that I really wanted to touch on, which is the boundaries issue. I think that's essentially what you were mentioning, which is, it's hard for people to stand up for themselves, to be confrontational. But I will say, as somebody who has been doing this for a while, it does get easier. It does get easier. And after you do it one time with one person, they're going to remember and they're not going to push your boundaries a second time. So do it as nice as you can. Be as nice and as gentle as you can, but do it. Because if you don't verbalize your boundaries, people are going to keep infringing upon you. And that has to do with clutter, and that has to do with really anything in life.
Yeah, life coaching 101 here too. So I think we touched on these a little bit throughout the conversation, but are there any big mistakes or lessons that you tend to share over and over again that you see people maybe having false starts or getting away from the more minimalist lifestyle that you want to point out to help people overcome those?
I think that we live in a consumerist society in which we are always taught that happiness, contentment, stress-free living lies in the thing. And it's very easy to believe that narrative. I mean, we've been fed it since we were one day old. And so I say for anybody interested in jumping on the less is more train, give yourself grace. If you fall back, if you fall off, know that it's not your fault. You're just a product of the environment that you grew up in. I fall back all the time. I get a targeted ad on social media and it's like, it speaks to me. And that's because the algorithm is so darn smart. And I think to myself, those are the boots I need to make me stylish at mom pickup. I'm not stylish, but those boots might be it. And so knowing and understanding that you are a product of your environment and you are susceptible to marketing and you will, fall off, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think if anybody's listening to this show, they already understand intuitively that real happiness, real joy, real living doesn't come in a thing. It comes with people and it comes with the bonds and relationships of those people who are closest to you. It's not in stuff.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Stephanie. If people would like to learn more from you, where can they go to check you out?
Well, you should totally come to my podcast, Sustainable Minimalism. We are going into our 5th year. I'm super proud, humble brag. This podcast is a top 20 leisure podcast in the United States. It's gone from having my mom and sister listen to having tens of thousands of people listen all over the world. So I'm really excited about it. Come on over, listen. And if books are more your thing, I have a book, Sustainable Minimalism. That's found wherever books are sold, but definitely check out your library first. You don't necessarily need to clutter your house with my book. So check out your library, Sustainable Minimalism.
So great. And we will pop the links in the show notes for you to discover more from Stephanie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Emma. This was a lot of fun.
So, if you listen to podcasts or watch YouTube, you've probably heard it 1,000 times before. The plea to subscribe and leave a review or a comment. Well, here we are again. But seriously, the review is especially important to us, as it has a huge impact on our discoverability amongst the zillions of podcasts all competing for your attention. So please consider leaving a review. And heck, we'd really love to hear your feedback. This pilot episode of the EcoParent Podcast Network was made possible with the generous support of Ontario Creates. Thanks for listening.